everyone. Well, it's March. It's that time of the month again where we get to really take a look at what's going on in the real estate market in Calgary. But before we really get into some of the stats, let me just give you my take on just some stuff that's going on out there that I think can affect people's decisions on whether they buy a property, whether they sell a property at all, or make a move, or just sit on their hands. Well, it's a well-known fact that we've had a lot of interesting things develop in the Middle East in the very recent last week and a half. And if you take a look, what always happens when there is unrest in the Middle East with countries that produce oil is we see a spike in the cost of oil. And of course, for maybe most markets other than Alberta, it's looked upon as more of an inflationary thing, doesn't really dramatically affect incomes or what's going to go on in the real estate market necessarily. But Alberta is different. Even though it's a well-documented fact that Alberta is more diverse in industry than we've ever been. And I'm really happy to be able to say that, for me, being that I've lived in this province my entire life. But I have been through a lot of this type of thing in the past. I might be dating myself for some of you watching this video, but I even remember 1990, with the Gulf War, and I watched at that time the price of gas at the pump, double literally within a couple of weeks, and oil price skyrocketed. We also saw 2006, 2007, oil went up to like $130 a barrel. And you might be looking at me right now thinking, well, what does that have to do with the real estate market in February and all these stats? And the truth of the matter is it has a lot to do with it, because real estate in Alberta tends to follow a lot what happens in oil and gas, because even though we are a very diverse province, better than we've ever been, we still are an energy province. And a lot of the revenue for Alberta is generated through oil and gas. And so these spikes in energy prices, they do bring a lot of money into the province, and it does bring in jobs. Now, I don't know any more than anybody else what's going to happen in the Middle East, with how long will this dispute take place? How long will it disrupt? Oil may be going through this strait that's near Iran that apparently is part of the problem. I'm not an expert in this field when it comes to understanding all the political side of oil and gas. But I do understand when I see oil, go up to $80, $90, $100 a barrel, and I see the kind of revenue that comes into Alberta, and that does mean a significant change in our market. And what it does is it does create jobs if it tends to last for a while and if oil prices stay high. And like I said earlier, it brings a lot of money into this province. And I have watched this trend happen over the years. And that just means that there's a higher level of confidence. And then when people tend to be more confident, they tend to buy real estate. I don't necessarily know that that's the best formula for buying real estate, is to just look at what everybody else is doing and then go, hey, I should do that too. I will tell you, the most successful people I've met tend to take a look at their own personal situation and make a decision on whether they should buy or whether they should sell real estate, not necessarily just on what's going on in the overall market. That's why if you look at some of the worst times to buy real estate in Alberta have turned out to be the best times. So what I'm getting at before I get into the stats here is, as you watch these stats, and you're going to enjoy it, I'm going to go in and do a deep dive into what's happening. But I want you to think hard about your situation, on what you think is the best solution for you. Should you be buying a property right now? Should you be selling a property right now? Or should you be buying and selling at the same time? And take a really good look at where you're at, as far as your job, as far as your finances, as far as your situation in life. Are you upsizing? Are you downsizing? Are you buying your first home? Like, we all have different stages in our lives, and real estate affects those stages. And I will tell you, if you focus a little bit more on that, and maybe just a little bit less on the market, I will tell you, you'll make better decisions. I'm not saying don't look at the market. Of course you should. It's a factor in your decision making. But what I am saying is just don't necessarily base your decision on what everybody else is doing or what everybody else is not doing. You never know until about 6 months to a year from now as to whether you made the absolute best timing on your decision, which is why it's almost impossible to time the markets perfectly. But I will say, just for what we're seeing and the spike in oil, if this conflict tends to last and disrupt oil the way that it is, we could be in for an interesting ride as far as oil prices and as far as creating jobs in Alberta. And this very well could be a very, very good time to buy a property, because you'll see by the stats, we don't have the best market in terms of prices rising right now. We have a market right now where you'll see is an opportunity because there is higher levels of inventory and there are some fear. And my experience has been most people, when they feel a little fear, they tend to sit on their hands. And that's not always the best decision. So anyway, let's get into these stats, and hopefully it'll help you make some good decisions. But I also hope that you won't be afraid to reach out to me if you've got questions about anything that we talk about in this video, because I'm always here to help. I got a lot of experience in this. I'm never going to, get on camera and say I can predict what will happen in the future, because nobody can. But I do have a lot of experience in what has happened in certain trends that I've seen and certain things, events that have happened over the years that have affected the market 6 months, a year, 2 years after the fact. And I'm happy to share my knowledge and insights with any of you if you have those kind of questions that you want to reach out for. Okay, let's get into some of the numbers here. You will notice February 2025, our MLS system did 1,718 sales. And here we are, February 2026, 1,526. So we're down 11.18%. And if we're looking at year to date, we've done 2760 as opposed to 3167. So we're down 12.85% in volume. And for listings, you'll see that we are at 5551. A year ago, we were at 5724. So slightly less inventory than we had a year ago. Still, that's 3.34 months supply of inventory, which would be considered more of close to a buyer's market. Maybe everybody has their own definition on this, but you could call it a balanced market as well, depending on where you're from. But for Calgary especially, we would call that to be more of a balanced market. And you'll see our benchmark price came in at 557,450, and that is down from 584,050. Now that's for the year. If you look at just for the month, we were at 560 as opposed to last year we're at 586,300. Now you might look at that and go, oh, does that mean the prices are really dropping? No, it doesn't. Don't hit the panic button. That just means that there were less expensive properties that sold. I mean, that's still the benchmark price, and it's considering how many expensive homes sell versus how many less expensive homes sell. But if you do have more higher end homes selling, it will always affect the benchmark price. It certainly would affect the average price. That's why you'll still see that we're at 627 versus 612, because the prices, even though it was a slower year last year, the prices still went up slightly. On this chart right here, you'll notice in blue, it gives you a better visual of where the inventory is. And you can also see in red just where we have seen as far as prices are going. And you can see right now, we're below zero. So we're seeing softening if you take into consideration the entire market. But again, don't press the panic button. There is, as you'll see in these stats in just a minute, it depends on the product as to where the softening is. Not everything is softening, not every community is softening, but there are some that are definitely softening. And I'll just make mention of this again, and I mentioned it last month. We are seeing the builders being more aggressive, and they're taking some market share away from the resale market, because some of these newer developments, they've got some pretty good value there. And I will caution you, if you've never built a house before, or even if you maybe just built one, it's a crazy thing to do when you work with building, brand new construction. A lot of times people just feel let's just go to the builder and everything works out. I will tell you right now, it is a journey that you take when you build. So it's not a walk in the park. It's not all roses and rainbows. It is a journey, and I would highly recommend to take that journey is to work with an expert, someone like myself. It doesn't necessarily be me. I'm putting a plug in for me to say, yes, I could be that person, or someone on my team could be that person, but someone who has taken this journey many, many times and understands the process to keep the builder accountable and in line, because they do make mistakes. They, most builders have good intentions, but they do make mistakes. But I'm mentioning that in this video because the stats, you're looking at the resale stats, the MLS stats. And if I had the stats specifically for new construction, you would also see there's some pretty good value there as well. So that's just something to consider. So if we go right here, we're going to start off with apartment condos. You'll notice that we have an absorption rate of 21.84%, and that is staying, you can see, relatively low. Really, it started to drop off, into the fall, and it stayed pretty soft. So you've only got about a 22% chance of selling your condo right now. So we definitely have more inventory than we need. And our benchmark price right now is at $298,000 for the month. That's just for February alone. And so that's down from January 2026 by almost a point. And that is down by 9.2% from February last year. So you can see the apartment condos are going in the other direction. And that makes it challenging if you want to sell. It certainly makes it really appealing if you're looking to buy. And if we go down here, you can see the hard numbers. That's 345 out of 1,580. So I will tell you, if you don't have a solid strategy, if you're selling, and strategy does include price, but it also includes a strategy on everything else that you have to do, you can see that this is not an easy number here. But if you're a buyer, you got some real opportunity because you've got a lot of properties that are not moving, and some of these people are going to be pretty motivated. And that's one of the reasons why the prices are coming down. To get enough people who are motivated, well, obviously, the price comes down. And you can see that, the year over year, it's 7.7% from 2025. So anyway, that gives you a good understanding of what's going on in the condo market. Let's take a look here in row houses. So row houses, otherwise known as a townhouse. And townhouses are generally a conventional condo or a bare land condo. The big difference is bare land condos create a lot and you need a real property report. There's a little more of a demand for those and a little bit less supply. That's why we're sitting at 30.44% absorption rate, and our benchmark price is $423,600. So people pay obviously a little bit more for these. We still have a lot of inventory when it comes to these, but you'll find there's just a bigger market for them, because even people with children, people who have gone through separations, they tend to gravitate towards this type of a product. But if you notice, all the way from February of 2025, you'll notice that we were at $445,000 a year ago as the benchmark price, and we're now at 423. So we're going the other direction. You can see we peaked in April last year, and then we started seeing softening all the way down. And if you look even all the way back to 2017, you can see that as we hit 2021, we came out of COVID, things were in high demand, things were going well. We peaked in 2024, and that's why we've seen softening ever since. The hard numbers are right here, 270 out of 887. So same thing as the condos, just not as bad. You have higher inventory, lower sales, It just means an opportunity to pick some of these properties up. And they do make really good revenue properties too, to rent them out if you get them in the right location. One thing to be aware of though, there's a lot for sale that are competing with new construction as well. A lot of projects came online. And if you own in an area where you're competing with the builder, that's challenging. And I've seen quite a few people to sell would have had to sell for lower than they actually paid for. Not great if you're selling, but really good if you're buying. And keep in mind this, if you're looking at new construction, there still can be a better opportunity in the resale. So sometimes people look at resale for 5 minutes and go, oh, I can get a better deal with brand new. But they don't look long enough at resale, because there are some people who are very, very motivated for one reason or another, and they will be very aggressive on their price, and you can get a better deal than the builder. So keep in mind for that. Looking here, we're now at semi-detached, and this picture looks a little better. 42.27 absorption rate, more in a balanced market, with $682,000 as the benchmark price. So it's interesting that in January, at 667, we went up to 682. What happened in February? Why was did we go up 2.28%, even though we're down year over year? But why all of a sudden the spike in February? That's extremely interesting to me, as to all of a sudden there's a little bit higher demand for this type of product. And you'll see so far in 2026, we are down from in 2025, where we peaked at 685 for the year. So we are down from last year. But take a look at the hard numbers: 175 sales out of 414. So that's a significant increase from January of 118. I mean, that's even more than November. It's almost as much as October. That's not usual for this early in the year. So if that trend continues, for whatever reason, we could be on track to see a pretty good year for semi-detached. But keep in mind, a lot of people gravitate towards semi-detached because most of them don't have condo fees, and that's a pretty big deal. Now let's look here. I like looking at the market distribution here, and you'll see that $500,000 to $600,000 tends to be the sweet spot for semi-detached. I mean, that's a little more than 30% of the entire market. But if you can take a look here, 800 to 900,000, 9% of the market. $1 million to $1.4 million, 11% of the market. So we have a real variety of different product when it comes to semi-detached, because there's so many in the inner city. And I can tell you, you can find some really nice gems if you're looking at some of those inner city semi-detached. They're beautiful, they're spacious, great floor plans. But the one thing I've noticed is they can be highly upgraded, like really nice finishings inside. You can get some pretty darn good value for, anywhere from $1 million to like $1.2 million right now. I mean, definitely even if you get close to $1.5 million or $1.6 million, you're going to see some tremendous value out there right now. So here we are to detached houses. 37.92% absorption rate. So it's a balanced market. It's good. The inventory levels is pretty decent. We're hovering at $734,000, for the benchmark price of a detached home. So you can see we had a little better in February. Now, that is more normal to see that things rise a little bit in February. You just don't see, like on the semi-detached, where it rises as much as we did that quickly in February. Generally speaking, we start seeing the spring market begin in February, and it's really simple. People just like to move when it's warm outside. So, if you're selling your house now, chances are you're looking at April, May for possession dates. So the snow is often gone and it's easier to move, and that makes it really attractive for people, Maybe you can sell your house, buy another one, and get moved in before the kids even finish school so that you can really enjoy the summer in your new house. And that's a goal for a lot of people. So you're going to see the inventory level start to rise a little bit more, but you're also going to see the sales usually start to rise too. So if we look at the hard numbers, 736 out of 1941. So still obviously have higher levels of inventory than we need for the demand, but I have to say for a balanced market, that's really not bad at all. And I want you to consider this in all different products of the marketplace. 35% of the people I find, and I've been doing this for 25 years, 35% of the people on average are asking too much money for their property because they price it based on their circumstances or their financial needs or whatever their story is. They just want more for it. But in relation to properties that are similar, you can find better value. But people have been doing this as long as I've been in the business. It's not going to change. So that's why you can almost discount, 35% out of that 1941 are just properties that are just overpriced. And the funny part is, a small percentage of them will get lucky. Somebody will come along and just love the house and pay it, maybe pay a little more than they should, and they'll feel like they won the lottery, which they did. But the vast majority will just not have any success, and they just won't sell. So that's why when you look at 736 that did sell, that was the 736th of the good inventory. Properties that were priced right, ones that the buyers were comfortable with. They're the ones that are doing the shopping around. Most sellers aren't going to the other houses and looking to see what their competition is doing. The buyers are. So buyers tend to know the market more than sellers know the market. So all in all, this is a pretty healthy market. 35 days on average to sell your property. If you look at our pricing, the sweet spot is still $600,000 to $700,000 is you'll find that's just where most people can afford to get a detached house. But not far behind, $700,000 to $800,000, and we still have, a fairly decent inventory, $500,000 to $600,000 in Calgary. And then if I always look at that luxury market, especially $1 million to $1.5 million or plus, still 8% of the market. Even this 800 to 900,000 is 9% of the market. So, it's just all in all, it's a pretty healthy market. And still, even though when you look at Ontario or BC, some of the other big markets, Calgary is still really good value. To think that you can get a pretty decent house in Calgary and most communities in Calgary for $600,000 to $800,000 is really good value. So anyway, this gives you a pretty good sense of just where the market is. Now, let me leave you with this thought. There's a big question mark. What will happen between now and the end of June with this uncertainty that's going on in our oil market and in what's happening in the Middle East? Is there going to be more of people sitting on their hands going, hey, let's wait and see what happens with this dispute before we do anything? I'm nervous as to where this could go. Or is this going to be a percentage of people, a good percentage of people are going to say, hey, this looks like, regardless of what's happening there, I think Alberta is going to do well. And we have jobs here. We have a pretty good economic environment. And I have the confidence to move forward with my real estate plans. But I can tell you, I'm going to leave you with this. Out of all of the conflicts that I've seen that have been involved in countries that produce oil and gas that has affected Alberta, it has been a good time to move forward with your plans during the conflict. So think about that, and I'll look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next month.